Most women are taught to be pleasing, to dim their light just enough to make others comfortable, to smile when they want to scream and to give when they are running on empty. But some women, very few, are unforgettable, not because they play a perfect role, but because they become a mirror to a man's deepest longing and his deepest fear. She is not his fantasy. She is the one who shatters it. The woman he can't stop thinking about is not the most beautiful in the room. She is the one who seems untouchable, not because she's cold, but because she's whole. She belongs to herself, and that unsettles him. It cracks the illusion that a woman must orbit around a man's attention to feel valuable. He senses it before he can name it. He remembers her after he forgets her name. She is the shadowed flame, warm enough to draw him in, elusive enough to haunt him. She doesn't need to chase because she already is the fire, and the man, he is the moth. At first he tells himself it's just interest, curiosity, a passing thought. But later, in the silence between text replies, in the ache he doesn't want to name, he will realize he's been marked. Not by manipulation, not by seduction, but by presence. A presence rooted in depth, in sovereignty, in the mystery of a woman who has integrated her shadow. Jung taught us that the shadow is everything we refuse to see in ourselves. The dark impulses, the repressed rage, the aching need, the terrifying power. Most women are taught to suppress that, to stay sweet, soft, small, but a woman who becomes unforgettable does the opposite. She confronts it, she befriends it, and when she walks into a room, her energy carries that paradox, light and dark, in a single breath. Her very existence whispers, "I have seen what I am capable of, and I no longer fear it." This is what pulls him in, because deep inside, every man is seeking the anima, the feminine part of his own psyche. Not just beauty, not just kindness, but wholeness. A woman who embodies both the nurturing and the wild, both the dream and the danger. When she speaks, he listens. Not because she demands it, but because her words come from a place he can't access within himself. She's not performing, she's revealing, and that makes her magnetic. But here's the truth. To become this woman is not a game, it is a path, a descent. You don't rise into this power by pretending to be confident. You descend into it by facing every part of yourself you were taught to hide. The jealousy, the fear, the neediness, the rage, the ache to be chosen. And then you claim them. You hold them without shame. You stop seeking to be the woman who fits in and start becoming the woman who can't be ignored. He feels her even when she's not speaking. He thinks of her even when he tries not to. Because she activates something involuntary in him. She does not control him. She moves him, without trying, without needing. And this is the paradox of feminine power. The more she reclaims her wholeness, the less she needs him and the more he craves her. Not as a trophy, not as a prize, but as a presence that awakens something ancient in him. Do you understand the weight of that? To awaken something in a man that he has forgotten how to feel. To become the mirror that reflects his soul back to him and forces him to reckon with his own fragmentation. This is not flirtation. This is psychological combustion, and most men are not ready for it. That is why he cannot forget her. Because when a man glimpses that kind of woman, even if he runs from her, she leaves a mark. And yet this woman is not reckless. She does not burn herself out to light someone else's path. She knows her limits. She knows when to pull back. She can sit in silence without needing to fill it. She knows when to walk away, not to punish, but to protect her peace. That kind of restraint is not detachment. It's depth. She isn't withholding love. She simply refuses to pour herself into a man who hasn't yet earned access to her inner world. She doesn't obsess over when he'll call. She doesn't crumble at the silence. She understands that obsession is often born from scarcity, but she no longer lives in scarcity. She has grieved the parts of herself that once begged for scraps. She has buried the version of her that needed to be everything for someone just to be something for herself. And from that funeral, she rose, not hardened, but clarified. This clarity is what makes her unforgettable. Her energy is unmistakable. It lingers like smoke, like a memory, like a dream that wakes you in the middle of the night and leaves you wondering if it was real. He tries to replace her, distract himself, but nothing compares, because she wasn't just a woman, she was a reckoning. She forced him to feel more, want more, and question the man he's been pretending to be. But beware, this path is not for the faint-hearted, because the moment you step into it, the world will try to pull you back. It'll call you too much, too intense, too complicated. But what it really means is, you're no longer easy to control. You've stopped making yourself digestible and started becoming divine. Now ask yourself, are you ready to stop being consumed and become the fire? He will test you, not out of cruelty, but because something in him needs to know, is this woman real? Is she truly this whole, this powerful? Or is she like the rest, wearing confidence like a mask that melts the moment he withdraws affection? So he pulls back. He retreats into silence. He watches. He waits. Not consciously, perhaps, but instinctively. Because every man, whether he knows it or not, carries the memory of a mother's gaze, the ache of unmet needs, the confusion of unresolved wounds. And when he meets a woman who reflects his anima, he must reckon with all of it. The woman who is unforgettable doesn't panic when this happens. She doesn't chase him into his retreat. She doesn't bargain with her worth to win proximity. She understands something deeper, that when a man enters this psychological tension, it is not a rejection of her. It is a confrontation with himself. And if she can hold that space without collapsing, without contorting, she becomes the woman who haunts his thoughts, not with guilt, but with gravity. This is the difference between a woman who is available and a woman who is inevitable. The first waits by the door. The second becomes the threshold. And he knows, consciously or not, that to approach her again, he must shed something false. An old identity, a shallow pattern, a boyhood impulse. Because she will not meet him in his comfort. She will meet him only in his growth. This is the path of the shadowed flame. Not soft submission, not brittle control, but magnetic equilibrium. She radiates the ancient feminine truth, I do not need to be pursued, I need to be matched. And so she does not explain her standards. She does not argue with behavior that doesn't serve her. She simply withdraws her energy, not as punishment, but as preservation. She knows her worth is not proved by how much she endures. Her worth is expressed in how quickly she walks away from anything that disrupts her internal peace. Most women confuse reaction with connection. They feel his pullback and interpret it as failure, as if the sudden silence is proof of their inadequacy. So they perform, they over-explain, they shrink. They twist themselves into a version that might be easier to love. But the woman he can't stop thinking about does nothing. She lets him sit with the void. She lets the silence speak, because she knows, if he can forget her that easily, he never truly saw her. This kind of woman does not beg to be remembered. She simply is unforgettable. She has broken the cycle of performing to be loved. She has stared down her abandonment wound, held her inner child through nights of aching loneliness, and come out the other side with a kind of power that terrifies men who are not ready. She does not lead with seduction. She leads with truth. Her essence carries weight, and that weight makes shallow interactions feel meaningless. She is not amused by games. She is not sustained by attention. She is fed only by authenticity, hers first, his second. This is the woman who understands the Stoic principle of control, that she cannot govern the behavior of others, only her response to it. And so she no longer reacts to breadcrumbs. She no longer spirals at distance. She does not grasp at fading echoes of interest. She knows that no matter how magnetic she is, no matter how unforgettable, if a man is not ready, he will choose comfort over transformation. And that is not her burden. She chooses herself every time. This is what makes her so potent, so visceral, so unforgettable. She isn't just a fantasy, she is a standard. And once a man has met a woman like that, no one else will satisfy him. He may try, he may distract, he may even convince himself that she was too much. But somewhere in the stillness of his solitude, he will hear her silence louder than the voices of those who try too hard. This is the power of the woman who has integrated her shadow. She no longer needs to prove her goodness. She knows she is not only light, she is thunder and wind and fire and bone. She has tasted rage and loneliness and ecstasy and grief, and she wears it all with elegance. She is not digestible, she is divine. And so he remembers her, not for how she made him feel desired, but for how she made him feel himself. She was the mirror that didn't lie, the encounter that cracked his armor, the silence that spoke volumes. She did not love him to keep him. She loved him to awaken him, and whether he rose to meet her or not is his choice. But she will not wait. The woman who becomes unforgettable does not live in delay. She lives in devotion, not to a man, but to her own becoming. She does not cling to potential. She does not beg for readiness. She is already whole, and from that wholeness she attracts not a rescuer but a reflection. A man who has done his own descent, who has faced his own shadow, who can meet her not in fantasy but in reality. But until that man arrives, she rests, not in bitterness, but in reverence. And this is why he can't stop thinking about her. There's a difference between being wanted and being chosen. 1,000 men can want a woman, but only one man will recognize her, see her, revere her. The others will merely project their desires onto her, hoping she'll shape herself to fit their hunger. But the woman he can't stop thinking about, she refuses to be a projection. She is not a vessel for fantasies. She is a force. She does not mold herself for a man's approval. She invites him to rise. This is what sets her apart. She does not confuse validation with value. She knows that attention is cheap, but intimacy is earned. And because she values her emotional world, she does not hand it over freely. She knows the sacredness of her energy. She guards it not with walls, but with discernment. Not everyone gets access to her softness, because her softness is not a weapon. It is a gift, one that must be received, not taken. This discernment is what drives him wild. She could be his, she could surrender, she could melt into his arms and lose herself in the sweetness of fleeting affection, but she doesn't, not until she sees something real, not until she senses the depth behind his words, the integrity behind his promises, the congruence between what he says and what he chooses. Until then, she remains sovereign. Because she understands, surrender without trust is self-betrayal. And she will not betray herself again. She has done it before. She remembers the ache of self-abandonment, the sting of becoming someone smaller just to be loved, the hollow ring of being told she was perfect, only to be discarded when her truth showed. She's been through the fire. She's met her shadow. She's held her own brokenness in shaking hands and whispered, "I will not leave you again." That vow changed everything. Now when a man pulls away, she does not chase. When he returns, she does not rush. She watches, she listens, she feels. She is not guarded, she is grounded. And that stability, that calm refusal to be thrown off center, it is intoxicating because most men are used to reaction. They're used to their presence being the axis around which a woman spins. But this woman, she does not orbit, she anchors herself first. This stability doesn't just draw him in, it confronts him. It forces him to ask, why does her stillness unsettle me? Why does her silence echo louder than noise? And in that reflection, he meets the edges of his own fragmentation. He begins to understand this is not just attraction. This is alchemy. She is not pulling him in with charm. She is calling him back to himself. And still, she waits for no one. Not because she doesn't care, but because she has learned love without reciprocity is erosion. Desire without action is delay. She no longer entertains potential. She is loyal only to what is real, what is felt, what is earned. And in this commitment to truth, she becomes unforgettable. Because she gives him a rare gift. A glimpse into what it feels like to be with a woman who does not need but chooses, who does not flatter but reflects, who does not chase but invites. And that invitation, quiet, unspoken, laced into her presence, it stirs something primal in him. The desire to become, to rise, to match her fire, not possess it. This woman does not make him feel like a god. She makes him feel like a man, vulnerable, mortal, aching to be worthy. And if he is wise, he will not run from that feeling. He will follow it, into himself, into his depth, into the uncharted territory where love is no longer performance but presence. That is what she calls forth. She is not unforgettable because she fills his emptiness. She is unforgettable because she leaves space for him to find himself in her absence. She does not soothe his ego. She awakens his soul. And while the ego forgets, the soul never does. So what does it take to become her? Not perfection, not beauty, not manipulation. It takes truth. It takes standing in front of a mirror and seeing every wound, every need, every fear, and refusing to be ashamed of it. It takes grieving the times you were not chosen, the moments you silenced yourself, the nights you begged for love that came in crumbs. It takes burning down the version of you who lived for someone else's approval and rising from the ash, not bitter but boundaried. The woman he can't stop thinking about is not a fantasy. She is forged. She has walked through heartbreak without closing. She has sat with longing without losing herself. She has faced solitude not as punishment but as purification. And now, she does not need to be chosen to feel whole. She is already whole. And that, more than anything, what imprints her on a man's mind. She cannot be forgotten because she is not a distraction. She is a revelation. So the question remains, when he meets you, will he see the echo of every woman he could control? Or will he meet the mirror of his becoming? He cannot forget her because she held his gaze and did not flinch. She saw through his defenses not to manipulate but to witness. And in that moment, something ancient stirred inside him. The anima, the buried feminine within the masculine, reached toward her, aching not for conquest but for reunion. And though his mind may try to categorize, diminish, or explain her away, his soul knows. She is different. She did not collapse into need. She did not inflate into arrogance. She stood in the sacred middle where presence and power meet. And in doing so, she awakened the memory of something he didn't know he had lost: reverence. You see, most women try to be adored, but the unforgettable woman, she commands reverence, not through domination, but through energetic purity. She is not consumed by proving her worth because she knows her worth is not negotiable. It is not transactional. It is inherent. And because she no longer treats herself as something to be earned, she teaches others by example how to approach her. She does not beg to be loved. She becomes lovable in truth, not because she pleases, but because she radiates alignment. Alignment, that rare frequency where the inner and outer match, where words don't just sound good, they feel right, where a woman doesn't just say she has boundaries, she embodies them, where softness isn't a mask, it's a choice, and strength doesn't harden, it holds. This is the woman who no longer fragments herself into categories. She is not one-dimensional. She is not only nurturing, or only fierce, or only sensual. She is all of it without apology. She does not dim her wildness to make her warmth more palatable. She does not shrink her truth to make her beauty safer. She owns the full spectrum of who she is, and in doing so, she disorients men who are used to simplicity. But the right man, the ready man, is not looking for simple. He's looking for real. And so, when he meets her, He feels the energetic gravity of someone who has nothing to prove and nothing to hide. She is not trying to win him. She is watching not passively but consciously. She wants to feel who he is, not just the curated version, but the messy, unresolved, vulnerable truth. Because that's where intimacy lives. Not in performance, but in presence. She doesn't flinch when he reveals his wounds. She doesn't try to fix or soothe. She listens deeply. But she also doesn't tolerate projections. If he tries to make her the villain of his unhealed mother wound, she will withdraw. If he expects her to sacrifice her peace for his comfort, she will step back. Not with anger, but with clarity. Because she knows. A woman's power is not in how much she can carry, it's in how clearly she can choose. And she chooses wisely. Not out of fear, but out of respect for herself, for the partnership she wants, for the life she's building. She doesn't fear solitude because she has made peace with it. In fact, she treats her solitude as sacred, as the place she returns to recharge her flame. And that flame, that is what makes her unforgettable. He remembers her not because she said the perfect thing, not because she gave him everything he wanted, but because she disrupted the pattern. She refused to be conquered. She mirrored his depth. She held space, not to be chosen, but to choose. And when she walked away, if she had to, she did so without drama, without begging, without leaving pieces of herself behind. She disappeared with her dignity intact, and that silence haunted him. It whispered of her wholeness, her discipline, her unwillingness to betray herself for temporary validation. And though he might try to replace her with another body, another voice, another illusion, nothing feels the same. Because the woman he can't stop thinking about wasn't just a woman. She was an experience, a catalyst, a rite of passage. The high priestess holds secrets, but the shadowed flame, she reveals them. In the heat of her presence, every hidden insecurity, every unspoken desire, every piece of his false self starts to unravel. She does not do this deliberately. It is simply what happens when someone is fully integrated. She burns away illusion, including his. And here lies the final truth. She doesn't become unforgettable by being everything he wants. She becomes unforgettable by being exactly who she is, with or without him. No more shape-shifting. No more dimming. No more apologizing for wanting more, needing more, being more. She has made peace with her past. She has buried her illusions. And now she builds herself anew. Not for him, not for anyone, but for the woman she was always meant to be. He can't stop thinking about her, not because of what he gave him, but because of what she awakened in him. And once that flame is lit, there is no going back. She never had to raise her voice to be heard. Her presence did the speaking. And in that presence, clear, grounded, embodied, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, reverence laced with fear. Not fear of her, fear of what she revealed. That he had been living at the surface. That the kind of love he once chased was a performance. That he had been a stranger to himself, surrounded by women who let him hide. But not her. She saw him, and she made him feel seen without ever saying the words. That kind of seeing, it's rare, it's unnerving, it's unforgettable, because it demands becoming, not to win her, but to even stand in her presence without collapsing. The woman he can't stop thinking about isn't trying to be remembered. She's too busy remembering herself over and over again, every time the world tries to pull her into forgetting. She doesn't chase him because she understands polarity. Feminine energy does not move toward, it draws in. It doesn't beg, it beckons. And because she lives in this energy, she has mastered the power of space. Space is where attraction lives. Space is where tension grows. Space is where the mind stirs and the heart starts to ache. Most women fear this space. They rush to fill it. They rush to prove. But the unforgettable woman lets the silence stretch, not because she wants him to suffer, but because she refuses to interrupt his awakening. That awakening is not about her, it's about him. His fear of intimacy, his avoidance of vulnerability, his discomfort with feminine power that doesn't bend to ego. She is the test life sends when a man is on the brink of change. And most will fail, not because they are bad, but because they are still asleep. But the few, the rare few who are ready, they will rise. Because she does not love with safety, she loves with clarity, and clarity requires courage. She will not soften truth to keep him close. She will not mask her needs to avoid rejection. She will not weaponize her pain to make him feel small. Her love is clean, fierce, pure, and in its purity it purges. It forces whatever is false to fall away. He remembers her because she held a standard, not one imposed but one embodied, and he knows he could have risen. He still might. But either way, he can no longer unsee what she showed him. That real connection is not built on performance but on presence. That intimacy is not created through control but through courage. That love is not about possession but about devotion to truth. And now the question lives in him. Will he remain the man who could not hold her? Or will he become the man who finally can? But her life, it does not wait for that answer. She is already moving, not away from him but toward herself. She is no longer living in the waiting room of potential. She no longer sacrifices her becoming for a maybe. Her energy has become sacred, her time non-refundable, her standards not barriers but filters. She is not asking to be chosen. She is choosing moment by moment the version of herself that no longer needs to be remembered because she is now impossible to forget. That's the truth of the shadowed flame. She doesn't blaze with desperation. She simmers with knowing. And in that knowing, she becomes the embodiment of a truth few men are ready to accept. You do not earn a woman like this with charm. You meet her with your soul or you lose her. So when he thinks of her, and he will, it won't be the nights they spent together, or the things she said, or even the way she looked. It will be the moment she didn't chase him, the moment she didn't beg, the moment she chose herself not with rage but with reverence. That moment will haunt him, because it will force him to ask, why did she feel like home, and why did I walk away? And more importantly, how do I become the man who could be a home to someone like her? That's the mark she leaves, not just desire, not just obsession, but transformation. She doesn't just stay in his mind, she reconfigures it. Because once a man meets a woman who loves herself this deeply, he can no longer pretend that anything less will satisfy. She has shifted the standard. For his love, for his life, for himself. And now every other connection will be weighed against her, not because she was perfect, but because she was real. Because she showed him what it meant to love without losing yourself, to desire without dependency, to choose with clarity, to stand alone, not in loneliness, but in sovereignty. So if you're listening, wondering how to become her, it starts here. Stop asking how to be chosen. Start asking how to remember who you are. The woman he can't stop thinking about does not wait for love to give her worth. She is the worth, she is the flame. And the man who is ready, he won't try to possess it. He will sit beside it, feed it, protect it, and burn with her. Yes. Hear the moment you felt most empowered in the comments below. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.